Welcome to Liberty Sound with your host, Ryan Hill.
There's going to be a new world order out there. We've got to lead it.
And I'm going to nominate Donald Trump for Speaker of the United States House of Representatives.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Liberty Sound, hopefully for real this time. Wow, what an afternoon of technical difficulties and glitches, but the show must go on. I see the lights coming on that indicate to me my microphone is working along with everything else. So it's great to be with you. I'm your host, Ryan Hill. It's Liberty Sound, and instead of 4 o'clock today, it's like 5:15. But the show is going to go on like it will hopefully every week, unless I'm taking scheduled time off or some emergency comes up, and more in the future. Coming up on today's show, we've got the FBI raid update. I'll be sorting the truth from speculation, at least a little bit, to what extent I can do. There's been some flooding rains in Texas. We've got Dr. Oz. It's primary day coming up. Not coming up, it's today. In Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, it's a runoff. And in Florida and New York, there's primaries going on there as well. We'll get to Dr. Fauci in a little bit, who has announced his retirement and become the latest conservative talk show personality red meat target. Also, a shocker, you won't believe this one, the GOP, the RNC, in fact, is talking about election integrity. That's right. At least, they're rehashing some election integrity talk, and it has my interest piqued, so I'm going to talk about it. This show, Liberty Sound, can be found live on Podbean, usually at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 Eastern, but today it's about an hour behind schedule just because I was about ready to have a whole new audio setup. Well, let me get through this and I'll talk about the audio. Live on Podbean, it'll be published on there right after we're done, as well as Apple, Spotify, and TuneIn. Then Rumble and YouTube video will be posted later. I want to have that up tonight. It's going to be a busy day, though. Still have to vote after this is over. Show notes are going to be what show notes there are will be in the description, and I can put some of the links from the show. This will be in the published, not the live version of the show. You can follow me, FOA Ryan, on Truth Social, on Gab, and Telegram. On Telegram, I'm called FOA Universe. It's a channel on Telegram. It works a little bit differently. So the sound setup, before we get into the show, I have a beautiful, different piece of software. Well, the software is not exactly what I want in the long term, but it gives me the capability to patch through audio the way that I want to. And I had it all working. It looked great. I had tested putting sound bites through, tested the microphone, tested transitions, and we were great. It was gold. Except when I went to go do a test broadcast, I discovered that after, about 20 seconds, the audio gets distorted and it's out of sync and it just kind of sounds weird. So I could not go live. I'm dedicated on this program, and really just as a personal matter, to broadcast excellence. And I want to make sure what I put out there is of a certain quality. And you know that if you've listened to the show for any time. So the sound setup is almost there. And maybe next week I'll be able to use that. It's just one issue now. Like, I got the main problem solved. I just have a new main problem now. But this is kind of like the problem funnel. You go down, and once you solve a big issue, well, now you have time to sort through lesser issues. There's a rule or a paradigm you can look at problems through that, like, 80% of your trouble comes from 20% of your issues. So if you got 5 issues, it's really probably one causing you the most of the grief. And anyways, nobody cares about that, because you are here to hear the stories and hear perspective on liberty, and occasionally some guests. Today, just to start things off, so you've noticed, if you followed the primaries going on last week, Liz Cheney is out, or at least she will be after this session of Congress is done. Who didn't see that one coming? But what else happened? The same night, everybody's talking about Cheney, and I'll talk about her for a little bit here. But Murkowski is still in Alaska. She easily won her spot to get back in there. So, I mean, I don't know if that's really such a surprise. I don't. I thought she was kind of losing her popularity even in Alaska, but there may be a number of explanations for that. The party, the Republican Party, is moving away, generally speaking, and at least in the public eye, from these dynastic grips of the Romneys, the Bush Cheney dynasty, the McCain families, at least in the electoral sense. Liz Cheney is out. You probably won't see Jeb Bush or John Kasich in the spotlight again anytime soon either. I would throw Romney in that list, but who knows? I mean, he is in the Senate. He's got 4 years, I think, left before his term is up. So I mean, he's going to be there for a while. But I don't see him being the poster child, and that's because these people are not favored in the public view, in the public eye. But this doesn't mean that they're not still influencing party politics or controlling the direction of things from behind the scenes. Do not assume for a moment that these people are finished. I'm just telling you right now. This is just for my opening statements. The show isn't really about this today, although we'll touch on some of it. But Cheney, Liz Cheney, she may very well run for president. She may springboard or try to use this. Reminds me of some old Olympics footage I've seen on the vault where they have some fails on that sometimes, and it could end up like that for her. But don't doubt me; she's going to make a run for it if she can. And it's not me saying it; I think everybody thinks it, right? She's had this moment of publicity. But so, how does that work though when she loses her election? Well, for one reason, and I may have even said this last week, is there's a war chest that's built when you run for office if you raise a lot of money, especially if you're one of these establishment people. You're in the club, you have the fundraiser activities and the dinners, and you raise tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And some of these big campaigns go up into the millions that aren't even governors races. They're statewide. They are a congressional district within um, a district of a state. So look out for that. She could be playing Cheney, that is, could be playing the role of Romney over the last 8 years or so. The party's sane alternative to a Trump or DeSantis kind of figure. Somebody that the establishment can count on is the point. Somebody they can count on to toe the party line and not stray too far from the approved, focused, tested fundraising support from these people that want to control it behind the scenes with whatever way they can. I've often wondered, mostly to myself in 2012, why did Romney, who lost in 2008 to McCain, run again? I mean, did he think he'd be more popular the next time when he was rejected the first? And especially in the wake of the then recent Tea Party movement, 2012. And then again in 2016, his name was thrown out there by these establishment talking heads and the RNC inner circle that he would be a ticket savior alternative to Trump. They might, no, seriously, like they were going to forego nominating Trump, who won the delegates, and pull what's typically a DNC move, which is with their super delegates and the rules and whatever. They can get in whoever they want, whether or not the people vote for them in the primaries. It's really up to the parties. Sometime I'll talk about my issues with the party system, at least in the 21st century. I'm not necessarily anti-partisan from the founding of this country, but I don't think that it's really a requirement anymore to have parties. I digress. So I'm trying to talk about something to get through my opening comments. Why do they keep pushing these unpopular figures into the spotlight when the party base clearly wants change? Well, that question is going to take more time to answer than one show is going to allow, but I will. I hope to expound on it really just week after week, because that's one of the big themes in the fight for liberty is the people who control versus what the people want. The people who control is a small group. It's the inner circles. It's the connected. It's the donors. It's the people who have sometimes a lot of success. Sometimes it's just money that sometimes it's passed down. I don't ignore the fact that there is money that is handed down generationally, and that with that money can come power. But you also have to know how to use it. Otherwise, people can lose money. People can go bankrupt. People can win the lottery and then go bankrupt. So I'll give you one reason, at least, that they do this, why they put these people in the spotlight. It's to spoon feed to the voter pool at large, which is more than people who just listen to this program and programs like this. But it's to give them the idea about what is or is not mainstream. Because what is the mainstream but what the mainstream media and established institutions tell you? That's what mainstream means. So to close out my opening comments, I'll give you this soundbite.
Joe Manchin and Liz Cheney? Well, no one likes them either.
Yep, there's something I can agree with, Chuck Todd. I didn't even give you the rest of that soundbite, but he said that they're not very popular with their own parties. So let's get into some headlines today. Then this late afternoon going into the evening. Maybe you're listening on the way home from your job. Maybe you've already gotten home and you're listening to not the replay, but just the podcast. There we go. So Steve Bannon is getting pretty bold, and I don't have any sound bites for you, but you might want to go check out the War Room and see what's going on there, or catch some of the recent highlights. He's saying things like Garland is going to go to prison over this stuff. It's really starting to sound this FBI stuff. It's really starting to sound like, for one thing, that the judge who was anti-Trump was manipulated, and I'll explain why. He was already biased against Trump. I'll give you that. Okay. And may have, that may have already tainted this judge's judgment in the past. But the FBI, knowing that, and the White House, really, we're going to get to that in the soundbite, that knowing that he was biased and tainted, may have presented him like kind of red meat evidence. We're going to talk about Fauci as red meat, but he presented evidence to this judge that he couldn't resist. He just, oh my goodness, it confirmed all of his suspicions. And so he authorized the raid. And the judge sounds like he may not now be quite so happy about that. And if I have the detail on the soundbite, we'll talk about it. But it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. I don't want to get too much into the day-to-day of this because it'll be a week before I come back on here. So first off, in headlines, there's been some flooding in Texas, and no story on this, but just a comment that wow, it's a lot of rain in places that have had droughts. First, we had the was it Tennessee or Kentucky? No, it was Kentucky that had the flooding and it killed some 30 people. Well, then it was South or North Carolina, somewhere along the eastern seaboard, that had an area that had just been burned in a large wildfire, followed by flooding rains. Well, you know what happens when you get that scenario? It's called mudslides. If there's any slopes, and there are, on that, well, there's slopes pretty much everywhere, but out where I live, it's pretty flat. You'd have to hit it just the right spot to get a mudslide. Not a lot of steep slopes or ridges. So Texas was the latest to be impacted there, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where I am from, by the way. I'm originally from Tarrant County, Dallas County, Denton County area, that kind of that tri-county. It's bigger than that now. It's really just, it's a giant metropolis out there. They call it the Metroplex. And I think some other areas call themselves Metroplex now, but I'm pretty sure that was the first place called that, just because it's like 2 or 3 big cities that are all interconnected, and within there you have suburb communities, but you don't have to go to the big city for any reason. Like I lived close to Fort Worth, and it was only 20 or 30 minutes away, but we would only go there for special occasions, rodeos, stockyards, and things like that. Speaking of stocks, this was not planned. The stock market broke its 4-week winning streak at the end of last week, and I kind of thought that it would about midweek. It just seemed like it was running out of steam. I don't really watch it day to day so much, but I've been trying to keep an eye on things because, for just various reasons. It's a good idea to look at it, but not necessarily take any action just because you look at it. And some people can't do that. I understand. Sometimes you have to hide that from yourself when it's bad and you know that it's temporary. But we don't know right now. I don't know what's going to happen. I expect in 10 years the stock market is going to look better, but I don't know about the next 5. All right. Generally, over any 10-year period, the stock market, since it has been in existence to the public, has been positive. So keep that in mind before you cash out on your retirement. There's nothing wrong with diversifying, but what you end up doing is you try to time the market, and then you pull it out when you think it is at a good spot, and then it turns out that, oh, I just got the minimum value for my trade, and then now the market's going back up, and in order to get back in it, I will only have half as many shares as I had before, same amount of money, right? But anyways, so the Dow, last time I looked at it today, is down about 150 points. It's been dropping throughout the week. It's hovering. It's under 32,000 if it's still at that level right now. The Nasdaq was moderately red. It's been less bullish, I would say, than the Dow, but kind of moderate in its growth. There's been a 4-week growing period. It's kind of like just this ebb and flow. It's the breathing of the economy. Investors, the whole point of investing is to make money, right? You invest money in a company or in a stock or in a mutual fund that is expected to gain value for one reason or another, or to generate income. So the idea is that it does that. The idea is not that it goes down. But in order to get there, you may have to sell stocks, and mutual fund managers may sell stocks they think are underperforming in order to get on the upside curve of something else. Sell high, buy low, right? It's the golden rule of poker. I don't know, not poker. So both S&P 500 and the Nasdaq were down about 10 points. They're kind of neutral looking. And so it may be about time for it to come back down, or maybe it's done and it's going to go back up, depending on which websites you look at and who's making predictions. I'm not making any. I'm just letting you know where it's at. I would expect the most reasonable conclusion to be that it's going to go up and down. Probably it's not going to change a whole lot from where it's at between now and the election, because I think the election will determine some of those future investment changes. That's how it works. Look at the 2016 election. You can see a big change right after that happened. It didn't even take Trump going into office for that change to occur. It was just the expectation of what he would do for business. We'll talk about inflation if there's time here at the end too. Now let's get on to that FBI raid. I've got a couple sound bites for you. John Solomon was on with Hannity last night, and then we will talk about kind of the details of what exactly is going on. What are these documents they're trying to get in the National Archives and all that stuff? Some of it's still in the world of speculation. John Solomon is someone who investigates and is an investigative journalist in the classic sense of that. Let's hear what he had to say on Hannity last night, part 1.
Yeah, not only did they know, they were pushing the investigation. They gave the permission to the National Archives to send the original boxes of documents that Donald Trump had sent back to the archives to the FBI. That launches the criminal investigation. They then give the archives the permission, Joe Biden's blessing, to waive the president's best legal defense by saying you can't claim executive privileges over this. The current president will not allow it to happen. All that occurs long before a grand jury drops a subpoena on President Trump's lawyers in May and June, and long before the raid. The Biden White House is at the ignition point of this investigation, and it's ironic because if you remember back in 2019 and 2020, it was the Biden Democrats that were complaining about efforts to start an investigation of Hunter Biden. Now they're caught doing the same thing, trying to push an investigation of their political rival, the opposition leader of the party, likely to face him in 2024.
So it does sound like the White House has been involved in this, and that the Biden administration made a request to the National Archives concerning this, and the letters that they looked at and didn't take, and then came back later and took it and got a search warrant to do it while Trump was away. You may have heard about this. So what's going on with that? Now he's got a little bit more. I think this is on the same subject. So let's hear his thoughts to wrap that up.
Yeah, this is a letter from the acting National Archivist of America to President Trump's lawyer on around May 10th, and in it, it lays out the entire role of the Biden White House. The General Counsel's office was involved. It authorized the release of documents to the FBI. That's what starts the criminal probe. It then authorizes telling the Trump attorneys they will not be able to use executive privilege, and also telling the FBI, you can take these records without an executive privilege fight, go use them. So they not only start the ignition point, they facilitate it by taking away one of the president's potential defenses. Alan Dershowitz, other lawyers I talked to tonight, deeply concerned by the Biden White House's involvement in this. They didn't have to be involved. The FBI could have gone to court, tried to compel this stuff. Instead, the FBI takes a shortcut, goes to the guy who might have to run against Donald Trump in 2024, and gets the records through the back door.
That is the point right there at the end, that the FBI could have gone through the standard process or through a normal acceptable process to obtain the documents they sought. They had no reason to escalate, as we call it in the IT world. I need to escalate this issue. You call in support, you don't want it to take 24 hours, you need to escalate. It's an emergency. Well, everybody likes to escalate their own issues, right? So they jumped the gun, they jumped the shark, or I don't know, there's some saying on there. I'll have to get better at these sayings. I'm going to write down a list, get some sticky notes of sayings I can pull out of a hat sometime and hope that they're not inappropriate. Let's go to this story on the same subject. I know I was talking about John Solomon just there, who's with Just the News. I've got an article of his coming up in a moment. This is from Resist the Mainstream. Biden administration asked National Archives to let the FBI access boxes from Mar-a-Lago, according to a letter. And this is by Gary Ray, came out today. In an unfolding story, which we were just hearing about, a recently disclosed letter notes that months before the raid on former President Donald Trump's home in Palm Beach, Florida, Biden administration officials pushed the federal agency in charge of national records to allow the FBI to review documents reportedly at Trump's home. Acting archivist Deborah Wall later told Trump attorney Evan Cochran that the White House counsel's office sent a formal request to the NARA in Apple in April, the NARA in April. I'm not going to say that again. An excerpt from the letter says this: on April 11th, 2022, the White House counsel's office, affirming a request from the Department of Justice, supported by an FBI letterhead memorandum, fully transmitted a request that NARA provide the FBI access to the 15 boxes for its review within 7 days, with the possibility that the FBI might request copies of specific documents following its review of the boxes. And this is me now, speaking of copies, I've been thinking this since the very beginning. When I found out that they were after some kind of documents. So they're trying to get classified documents or something that Trump took physically from the White House. Does no one think that there is a copy of that document somewhere? I don't know, maybe on a computer, on a server in the White House or in wherever they keep the records for that, probably not physically in the White House. And where do you think the documents came from? Did he handwrite them? I think some things may be handwritten notes, but the bulk of them probably are things that were printed. Well, how do you print something? You have to have a file. You have to have a computer to print it in the first place. This is the 21st century, 2022. We shouldn't even have to, think about this, but we just kind of go right past this. So that's what I mean by, filtering the truth out of this. The media, the mainstream, and this is Resist the Mainstream, ironically enough, the mainstream will walk right past some major detail and get you focused on what are the documents about. Well, wait a second, before we even talk about what the documents are about, why would they need to seize them from Trump? Okay, and if he's already seen them, then what good does it do to take them away from him? Because he's already seen the information in it. If it says there's aliens, and by the way, Congress apparently I don't have the details on this, but apparently they are insisting that UFOs are of non-man-made origin. I don't know what that means, but I thought I would pass that along. So I also had a Dershowitz clip on this too, but time with the technical glitches today didn't allow for it. Listen to Alan Dershowitz on these legal issues, especially when it comes to Trump, because he's somebody from a middle to left, farther on the left than the middle perspective, but is a legalist and a pretty good lawyer from what I understand. I've never had to hire him. Never had to hire. Well, I wouldn't say I've never had to hire a lawyer, but not for like criminal legal defense. That's for sure. Maybe through being on a board or something. I used to own a condo and be on a condo owners board. I was the president, and I don't know. We signed all kinds of paperwork, insurance, lawyers, liens for people not paying their dues, all kinds of fun stuff. But Dershowitz, is shocked by this too, and it's just an upheaval of the process of law. Yes, they are using legal processes. Yes, they are filling out forms, but their entire intent is really it's criminal because they are trying to affect the outcome of an election that hasn't happened yet through extra legal means. Yes, there's legality involved, but it is extra legal. Now, moving on a little bit from there, but not too far, polling suggests the public both supports and doesn't support the FBI raid, depending on who you listen to. And it also depends on for whether someone supports it, who they listen to. According to MSNBC and Rachel Maddow, I'm trying to be nice. She says the public supports it and has a poll to back it up. I don't have the details or internals of that poll, but Fox and conservative personalities say that the public doesn't support it. So, what does that mean? Well, I think it probably means we're in the same spot we've been since 2016, end of 2016, with the rise of Trump into political power. Is you've got people that are just locked into their positions, and if it's if the position is orange man bad, then by George, it's orange man bad. It's nothing's going to change that. And then on the flip side, Trump himself has even said originally, I don't think he says this anymore because it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but he said he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose any support. Now, he didn't mean he was going to do that, but he just meant basically, I can make the biggest mistake in the world, which shooting someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, not in self-defense, would be that, and not an enemy combatant. I guess there could be an exception to it. But his point is that he couldn't lose any support from his supporters because they love him so much because of what he stands for. Now, the mainstream always leaves that part out too. They don't just blindly love him. Some do, but some blindly love the Democrats. Some blindly love Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes, whose soundbite I also couldn't play today due to technical limitations. And many of you out there are probably glad because you don't want to hear from them. I'll take a poll on that. So, with that in mind, why are there not, another question people have is, why are there not FBI whistleblowers? Well, as I go to just the news, it turns out now that there actually are some whistleblowers, or at least more. I think today is not the first of this to come out, or yesterday is when this story is from. This is by Ben Whedon in Just the News. He says another slew of whistleblowers has come forward with misconduct claims after the FBI following the Bureau's raid on former President Donald Trump's Florida estate. FBI field offices in Miami, Salt Lake City, Buffalo, and Newark face accusations that their upper management coerced agents to sign false affidavits, inflated terrorism caseloads to improve their apparent performance, and engaged in illicit sexual activities or concealed those of others, according to the Washington Times. And the story goes on to detail some more of this corruption. I'll leave you all a link to that as well. And there's a lot of comments in there, but there are some whistleblowers coming out. It says prior to the FBI's raid on the Trump's estate, a string of whistleblowers had come forward with accusations of political bias against senior FBI officials. The Washington field office, which sent the agents to Florida to raid Trump's estate, was facing its own set of allegations. So don't be mistaken that any of this is not politically motivated. That's what the previous comments on polling, where people are locked into their positions, you have to be able to see through your own side's bias. There are times when the right is wrong. Well, I don't know if I want to say it that way because that just kind of sounds bad, but how is the right wrong? But you know what I mean? The right side of the aisle, it has maybe too hard line of a view on a matter. Okay. And that's part of my issue sometimes with purists on any side, whether they be libertarian, Republican, Green Party, anything like that. We do live in the real world, and there is such a thing as compromise. It is part of the political process. There's bad compromise. There's compromising on values such as things enshrined in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that you should never compromise on. But when it comes to implementing policies and some of the lesser issues, there has to be some room for the removal of bias. And when you only see through the political lens, you don't see that you're having a bias. So Trump gets raided, and your first thought is he deserved it, as opposed to a conservative would hear that Hunter Biden got raided and say, finally, he deserved it. And many are calling for that. Well, I want justice to be done, but I want it to be done not only through the process, through filling out the correct forms and all of that, but it has to be done with the proper intent, which is not to have a crime and then search for proof that of a crime that you think occurred, but dealing with real evidence, probable cause, not made up probable cause, not probable cause that we can't tell you what the cause was or what was probable about it, which was has yet to come out. Some of that will be coming out redacted, and we'll comment on that when it comes. Well, at least there's some whistleblowers. All right. Now, this time I would be taking a break if I had my nice new program running. I had it all set up. I was so excited. I was going to take a cough break and a water break. But now I'm just going to jump into our next story, which is about this RNC ad on election integrity. And I'll play a little bit of it here in a second. But RNC Research retweeted Steve Guest, who is a communications advisor for Ted Cruz, this past Sunday. The original tweet is from RNC Research. It's a video that they put out on June 23rd. I will play you part of this video, and it has comments from many prominent Democrats. You've probably heard some of this, or if not all of it, I'm just going to play a little bit on the topic of election integrity. Here we go.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. And you can have the election stolen from you.
How can you win with Russian interference, though?
That's a
That's
real
what I'm
thing.
scared about in 2020.
But rightly.
Because I think he's an illegitimate president that didn't really win. So how do you fight against that in 2020?
You are absolutely right.
He's an illegitimate president in my mind.
Would you be my vice presidential candidate? Folks, look, I absolutely agree.
Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put in office because the Russians interfered.
Trump knows he's an illegitimate president.
The president-elect, although legally elected, is not legitimate.
I don't see this president-elect as a legitimate president.
You said you believe that Russia's interference altered the outcome of the election.
I do. We have a
Okay, that's a good place to cut it right there. And you probably recognize a lot of those voices. I'm not going to try to repeat them. The RNC put this out, right? Okay, same RNC that I recall has told us that Trump lost this last election on his own, and he put in the policies and the decisions on how to campaign, and everything that happened was his fault. And there was no fraud sufficient enough to overturn anything at any precinct, at any level that was of any significance. So why do they have this video of Democrats and just people on the left in general who are like talking people on CNN and stuff like that, MSNBC, questioning the election and pointing it out as if like, hey, how come you can question the election but we can't? Well, I've got some thoughts on that. Now, for one thing, I'm glad that this is just getting out and getting some attention, but knowing full well that their position is that the 2020 election was on the up and up, safe and secure, beyond questioning. I think this is just speculation. All right. Ryan Hill, your lovable host, hoping to be your lovable host. Come back and listen often. I think that they actually want to discredit the election integrity movement by saying, well, the other side does it too. I'm not saying the other side commits election fraud too, but the other side complains about it when they lose. When the election doesn't go their way, like in Georgia with Stacey Abrams, they complain about it. Now, there was another election in Georgia or Alabama where he might have been a sheriff. He was some guy that was a tall dude, and maybe he wore a cowboy hat. It's pretty much all I remember about him now. They got national attention, but some, bad info came out about him, and he denied it, but he kind of backed down and ended up losing his case. Trump wanted him to get out of the election and let somebody else step in that had a better chance at winning, but he did not do that, and he ended up losing, and I guess the seat went to the Democrats, whatever it was. There were Republicans that complained of election fraud in his race. And at the time, I rejected it. I said, you cannot be just saying this when your candidate loses. Okay, that's what the Democrats do. Okay, and they did. Stacey Abrams pointed it out. Hillary Clinton wouldn't acknowledge that Trump was legitimate to her. for the presidency. Now, I think with the perspective now, post 2020, 2 years removed almost, coming up this November will be 2 years removed from that 2020 election, which, in my opinion, was the real insurrection. Um, before that, I thought those claims were silly, but looking on it now, I think some of them are silly, some of them are made up, but I also think that, at least in Hillary Clinton's case, is that she had the insider info and was told that you were guaranteed you will win this election. It doesn't matter what happens on election day. It's not possible that they can overcome our machine, which would include voter drives, which would include mail-in drives. But then we also now have the perspective to know that even some courts have admitted and declared that some of the methods they used to change the rules were not above board and were not legal and shouldn't have been counted. Very minimal cases have there been anything overturned, but at some little level, there's been just a little bit here and there, little sprinkles coming out of the salt shaker. We need a lot more than that, though, to change the narrative. That's the message I want to get across on election integrity. Is we've got a long ways to go. I think there are some good things happening, but we also have to have a long-term vision. 2020, the longer you get away from that, I want to see it litigated properly too, and then everything restored. But what if I have my children and grandchildren and we still haven't got to the bottom of it yet? Are we going to go back and reverse 80 years of policy? It just, at some point you have to say, okay, the past is the past. We can correct it in the sense that we can, and what a lot of us want to do is go back to pen and paper only elections, hand counting, have a national holiday. You vote on election day unless you're in the military and deployed or some extreme, circumstance that you can't get out of, provided for by law. But until we get there, there's going to have to probably be some intermediary steps. I will post the full video. It's on YouTube. It's like 12 minutes long of all that denial of the elections. But hey, you know what? Some of those people, I don't know who's, I don't know all the names that are in there. Some of these people might have actually been cheated out of their races. It's completely feasible to me at this point that whether it's done at the national level, whether it's just pockets, whether some people know all the ins and outs of this and it's just a little insider secret that people at the right clubs know about, and they laugh at us who are trying to figure it out. I don't know how it all works, but it seems like it probably goes both ways. All right, let me give you a non-political headline before we dive right back in and talk about Fauci. An actress who has been in a show recently did something that I thought was really cool, and I heard about this on another show. Tiffany Haddish, I don't know if it's Hadish, because I haven't watched the show. I didn't. It's called Girls Trip. It's not, even if a show is called Guys Trip, I don't know if I would watch that. I'd be a little bit scared these days of what that show might be about. But Girls Trip, actress Tiffany Haddish paid off her house with the $80,000 check that she got from the home, claiming she was afraid she would be, or of becoming homeless again. Not afraid that she would become homeless, but she wanted to pay her house off. So it's not very often that you hear about somebody in Hollywood or in acting on television or anything like that, anybody that's famous, sports and all that, doing something smart and wise with their money. Now, a lot of people would say, Tiffany, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't pay off your house. You can leverage it. Look at all that equity you've got. You could buy yourself some multifamilies and take the income from that. That'll pay your mortgage. Yes. But will it pay your mortgage and the air conditioner when it goes out in an unseasonably hot summer? Or the heater systems that were having trouble and pipes that froze a couple of winters ago and may come up again? Does that account for the fact that maybe she doesn't want to do real estate? Oh yeah, well, you should leverage it and invest it in the stock market. What, that lost like almost half its value for a little period of time there, or not half? It was like 25%, I think, at the lowest, from the highest point to the lowest point recently. Would that have been a better idea? And then, oh no, it went down. Let me take my money out. And then she would have lost $80,000. No, it was a great idea to pay off her house because that gives her stability. It's a goal of mine. It's actually the only thing that I'm working towards paying off left at this stage of my life. And I don't want to take out a mortgage to go, buy some rental properties or anything like that in the future. because there's risk involved with it. You could do that if you want. I know people have done that. In fact, I mean, like I said, I've got a mortgage myself, but it's a vehicle, okay, but it comes with risk, and I think it's a good idea to pay that off. And you can always sell it and go take out a mortgage if you really don't like that and you need the money. But hopefully, she'll get some more acting jobs. And I don't know if she's a great actress. She must be pretty good to get $80,000 for something on a Girls Trip. So I hope it's not a terrible show. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but that was kind of fun. So let's get back into Fauci now on the time we have left here. And that'll be, I think we're doing pretty good on the time. For all things considered, today is as hectic as of an afternoon as it's been for me. So Dr. Fauci has announced his retirement in December or something. I don't really care when he actually, is done. He could retroactively make his retirement 3 years ago. I'd really like that, and then undo everything that he, messed up. Now everybody seems to be mad at Fauci, no matter what else you think about any of the issues going on. Either you didn't think he did enough, or you think that he was a tyrant. And I'm on the side of he was a tyrant. Okay, I've been impacted by some of the downstream effects of CDC policies and his publicity stunts, him and Bill Gates. It's not necessarily so much even what their policies were. It was just how, because they went on all the talk shows and put all the propaganda out there, and Dr. Burks or Birch, I think it's Burks, included in that. They just kept putting that message out there to where everybody was repeating it, even people that weren't normally political at all. And then companies, became like, okay, you must COVID up before you enter the building, and just went crazy with it. Now everybody's regretting it and thinking, well, I wish we hadn't done that. Well, have a little bit of agency next time. What's that word? And make decisions on your own. So Rand Paul has been Johnny on the spot going after Fauci for what a lot of us see as justice. Okay. And he's been talking about the gain of function issue, which is the question of, did the United States fund research that actually enhanced these viruses? And are we still doing that? And we can't seem to get answers. And so Rand Paul has been grilling Fauci on that. Let's hear him on Hannity last night about this topic.
Dr. Fauci, I believe you have testified that you didn't give any.
Excuse me, that's Kennedy. We'll do him next. Let's get let's see, Paul. That's the guy's name.
It's the same guy. It's the same guy who also was complicit with these doctors who wrote to Lancet, the journal, and said, oh, it's a conspiracy theory to say that this came from the lab. I think this is the biggest cover-up in modern medicine. And when we get to the bottom of it, when we take over the Senate and we take over the House, we will investigate the origins of this, because it's serious. There are labs around the world doing experiments on viruses that have 50% mortality, trying to make them more transmissible, to trying to make them aerosolized, trying to make them more infectious. This is a death wish for humanity, and we must do something about it. And Dr. Fauci's at the very origins of this, because he funded the research and then he denied it was gain of function. But I had a panel of 3 prominent scientists come to Congress about 3 weeks ago, and they acknowledged that this was gain of function, and it hasn't been honest, that Dr. Fauci has not been honest with the American people about it.
It's just unbelievable. Whatever you believe about the origins of COVID, whether it came from a bat, whether it came from a monkey. Wait, that's monkeypox. Is monkeypox even supposed to have come from a monkey, or is it just called that because of, what it looks like? Smallpox doesn't come from a small. That's just what they look like, right? I never had smallpox, as far as I know. Is there a smallpox vaccine? I don't even know. I don't want to know. I don't want to hear about the topic at all. But I do want to know if the U.S. government is funding gain of function research, whether it's in Wuhan, China, whether it's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Seattle. It doesn't matter. Okay. I want to know about it, because why are we trying to enhance viruses to make them more transmissible? What in the world? And that's not the first time I've heard that. I just, like, right now I'm thinking, like, why would you try to make a pandemic worse? That's what they're doing. And maybe they're saying, oh, well, we want to find out what does it so we can know how to prevent it. But did you ever stop and think what happens if it's more transmissible and it transmits. Hello. Anyways, I guess Dr. Rand Paul feels the same way about it. Now let's move on to Senator John Kennedy, who he interrupted our Rand Paul soundbite, but he was giving, or Fauci was testifying on Capitol Hill, and this is John Kennedy questioning him. I like his style.
Dr. Fauci, I believe you have testified that you didn't give any money to the Wuhan lab to conduct gain-of-function research. Is that right?
That is correct.
How do you know they didn't lie to you?
Excuse me, sir?
How do you know they didn't lie to you and use the money for gain-of-function research anyway?
Well, we've seen the results of the experiments that were done and that were published, and that the viruses that they studied are on public databases now.
Well, okay, they're on public databases now. Seem to struggle with that one. I don't know why. No, what he was doing is what liberals, excuse my language, always do, is when they're questioned on something and they're caught in either not knowing what they're talking about or an outright lie, and it's political, they just look at you with this confused, like, excuse me, what are you talking about? Like, what? You know, something other than what we said might be the truth. Well, I'll have to go back and check with my people. This is unheard of. I just can't. I can't understand what's going. Now I see why he sounds the way that he does. It just starts happening to you when you do that. So, but good for John Kennedy. Question this guy, okay, and then question him some more after he retires, like they're saying they're going to do. I think he deserves every bit of it because he has yet to face one negative impact to his own personal life. And I'm not calling for that, by the way. I'm just saying he has not personally suffered, other than he probably can't go out in public and, without getting like a reserved booth or something at a fancy restaurant, but he can't probably just be seen out in the general public, because I don't think people are going to be, kissing his shoes like you shouldn't do that. It's 6 feet until they finally reverse that. And now you don't even have to quarantine for 2 weeks when you get COVID. It's just whatever, we just change the policies whenever. Oh, you lost your job. Oh, this entire industry went out of business. Oh, there's no more mom and pop small restaurants anymore. Whatever, la-di-da. Okay, I'm going to retire. Yeah, okay, this guy just gets to go off scot-free. And I don't like it. Now, at the same time, I am a person of faith, and I believe that there's verses in the Bible that say, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." Okay, vengeance belongs to God. It's not my job to exact vengeance. Okay, but that's why I said the thing earlier at the beginning of the program about Trump and Fifth Avenue is like self-defense would be the exception, right? If I was in Fifth Avenue and I shot someone unprovoked, that's called murder. That's called attempted murder. It's called a crime. But if that person was firing at me and it was, I don't think you can do this in New York. Maybe after that Supreme Court ruling, things will change eventually. But if I was in an open carry state or a constitutional carry state, such as Oklahoma, where I live, and I was downtown and somebody started shooting at me and I fired back in defense of my own life, or the people standing behind me, I would be justified. I would probably still have to, get booked and have a police report, but I don't think that I would be getting any criminal charges on my record. I would probably be getting praised by the community, like the young man in the mall not too long ago when we were having those string of shooting incidents. By the way, if you noticed, those have gone away recently. I wonder why all of a sudden, when we're focused on the FBI, there's no more shootings. And they're talking about all the violence they're afraid of against the FBI, and that hasn't happened, although I'm sure that's being set up anytime now. But just some random thoughts that are coming through my head on this Tuesday afternoon that I think we all know the answer to, don't we? Or at least we know kind of some speculation. I've got one more piece of John Kennedy for you, and let's go through that, and then we'll comment.
And in the last conversation I had with Dr. Fauci, with respect to whom I bear no ill will, he was in front of a committee. They only gave me 5 minutes. I asked him a simple question: what did we learn from the pandemic? And I got a felonious amount of BS. Now, the Democrats won't press, but if we take back control of this Congress, we will. And retirement or not, he will be subject to a congressional subpoena. And the American people deserve answers.
That's right. We do. It's our country. It's our government. It's our CDC. It's supposed to be an agency that serves to protect us and serves to help the public health be improved. And there's ways you can do that without becoming tyrants and forcing people to do X, Y, or Z. And yeah, that's another good point on here. The Democrats won't hold this again. Why? Now this far removed, it's one thing to have been locked into your positions during the heat of, or the height of, and the heat of the COVID pandemic in that first summer, 2020, and everything that was going on. But now we have data. Now we have studies. Now we have perspective and time to look back on it. This should not be a partisan issue. And unfortunately, not enough Republicans are going after it. That's the real truth of it, is that it's not even really a unified effort by the Republicans. But where's Liz Warren? Where's Pocahontas on this? Why is she not? Doesn't she stand up for the little guy and the rights of the disaffected? And what about Native Americans? Have they been affected by this? Have they been shut down? Now, maybe they've got different setup. At least in Oklahoma, you've got the reservations and the sovereign nations of the tribes, which are sovereign nations, but they're also part of the United States. The CDC may not have any jurisdiction related to them at all. I don't know. They have their own, health departments and things like that. But where are they? We need people. And I think Tulsi Gabbard has been on this, and a few Democrats have spoken out, but not the mainstream. Okay. And that's the theme, I suppose, of today, is that it matters what the mainstream conversation is, because that's what people are talking about. Those are the facts that are injected into the conversation. So again, I'm glad that Fauci gets to be the red meat right now. However, he's not the source of all of our problems. He is just a symptom. How did he get that much authority? Well, the people intellectually gave it to him at some point, right? The mainstream did that. So that's what we have to get past. Okay, got a few minutes here left. Let's see if I can blaze through a couple of these topics. More inflation we talk about every week, so it's okay if we don't go too much into it. I talked about, the whole concept of what is inflation. It has more to do with how much money is in the monetary supply. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from treasuries and reserves. Okay, we talked about all that. Go back, listen to last week's show. I have another question I'd like to get to, and that's the topic of Bitcoin, but it's not probably what many people might think, me being a techie kind of guy. I'm really not the biggest fan of Bitcoin. Okay, in crypto is really what I should say. Of the cryptos, I think Bitcoin is the most, well, I don't want to say solid, because I'm going to talk about what backs it. Bitcoin is the most, it has the longest track record. It was kind of the original. I don't think it was necessarily the original crypto, but it might be the original cryptocurrency. There's questions about why did it come from China. I think that's where the original concept was introduced, but it's decentralized. Just like, by the way, even though the treasury is in charge of our dollar bills that are printed, it is a decentralized system in transactions. There is no central database that logs where a $20 bill has been sent. Remember those where'sgeorge.com stamps that were put on, and you'd handwrite them on those, and we started tracking on the internet, where's this dollar been spent? Well, even that didn't go very well, because only 1 out of a million people that handle that dollar would have noticed and cared to go track on where's George. But with Bitcoin, there is a ledger of where this code has been transacted, but it's anonymous, and it's completely decentralized in that nobody issues it. It's just mined. And I don't really understand that completely. I know kind of how it worked at the beginning, but that's what backs Bitcoin, is this algorithm that is some kind of code that puts together these unique, what do they call it? If I had someone to bounce the question off of next to me, it would be really nice, but like a assistant producer or something. But what's the term? For anyways, is what the crypto is, measured in. But it's not the same. It's backed by the intelligence of an algorithm, but it's dependent upon the existence of electronics. So it's kind of like a piggyback backing. Whereas money, which is backed on fiat. What's the difference between Bitcoin and a dollar? Well, I suppose the Bitcoin is backed by the algorithm, whereas the dollar is backed by faith in the U.S. nation and its government, that it will be good for its debts and will be able to meet its obligations. And even though we've had our credit rating degraded or whatever it was a couple of years back during the Obama years, and that was a big deal back in those days, it's still pretty much, it's good. You can use dollars, you're fine. You can also use Bitcoin to buy and sell things. That's kind of what I like Bitcoin for, is just transactions, not as an investment, not as playing the dollar versus Bitcoin and trying to, wait till it goes up, because you don't know when it's going to go up. All right. Nobody knew when Elon Musk was going to buy a bunch and then sell a bunch, and all this stuff happens. The people like that can play it and win. The little guy, that's just want to get a Bitcoin. You know how much that's going to cost you right now? Isn't it like $20,000? Well, it also used to be 40,000. All right. But if you put $100 in and you used Bitcoin like a debit card, and places you went to accepted that, then that would be just using it as transactions. And I think that is a use case for Bitcoin, but I'm not ready to put my retirement or any kind of money that I will ever need during my life into Bitcoin, for the reasons of, we just don't know what's going to happen with it. What's going to happen when governments start regulating it to the point that they can seize. I know it's decentralized. I know it's theoretically not possible that they could seize it, but there's things that, they could, with all these digital IDs and everything that we've got, you could be barred from certain transactions. Maybe not in America, maybe not today, but things are happening in Canada, and things certainly go on in countries over in Europe and Northern Europe, kind of up in Scandinavia. It seems like kind of thing they would do. Very controlled societies, different cultures. There's reasons for it, but that's where I see on Bitcoin. Let's see. I had some things about the gold standard, but we don't really need to talk about that. Maybe next week, if it's still going on, I'll have to get an update. There's a helium shortage and a fertilizer shortage. The fertilizer shortage is still going on, and those are big stories that are kind of on the back burner right now. Unfortunately, if I had a second hour, I'd be happy to get to that, but we'll leave that away for now. I also have those alternative theories. Did you know that there are some people who think that 1,000 years have been inserted into the timeline? I don't know if I talked about that at all last week, but it needs a good 5 or 10 minutes to go through and maybe get some more interesting details on that before I bring it up. But I think I'm going to call it a show at this point and get this thing out and published. It's good to have all my listeners. I looked up the stats last week and saw that I've had 500 plus unique listeners to this program so far. And although I'd like it to be 500,000, 1 million, 50 million, I don't think any show gets 50 million, but I'd like it to be a big number. It'd be great. Okay. But I'm very grateful for everybody who's tuned in so far. Please share it. Don't forget, it'll be out on major podcast platforms and also YouTube and Rumble later. Have a good time and walk in liberty. Outro music, Chase by Alexander Nakarada. Royalty-free music used under Creative Commons License 3.0 and 4.0 International, creativecommons.org. The Liberty Sound podcast is produced in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Copyright 2022, Ryan Hill and Liberty Sound. All rights reserved.